I never thought I'd be that girl who settled, the one who picks the safe option because she's tired of the drama. But here I am, sitting in my perfectly adequate house in suburban Michigan, thinking about how I ended up marrying the human equivalent of a beige wall. I'm Sam, 32, and this is the story of how I married Lucas because I couldn't find a real man. Don't get me wrong, Lucas isn't terrible. He's just Lucas. When we met at my friend Katie's housewarming party, he was this tall, lanky guy who kept reorganizing the snack table to optimize the flow. That should have been my first clue. He's a manufacturing plant supervisor, and oh my gosh, does it show. Everything has to be organized, scheduled, planned out. He asked for my number by saying he'd like to allocate some time to get to know me better. I actually thought it was cute back then. Funny how things change. After my wild ride with Maurice, this gorgeous contractor who could light up a room just by walking in, Lucas seemed like a safe harbor. Maurice was all passion and spontaneity, but he also had a nasty habit of disappearing for days and flirting with anything that moved. Lucas texted back within minutes, always showed up exactly when he said he would, and looked at me like I hung the moon. Our first date was at a little cafe where he'd already scoped out the optimal table for conversation acoustics. I'm not kidding, he had note cards with conversation topics just in case things got awkward. Looking back, I should have run right then, but I was 29 and everyone kept telling me I needed to get serious about finding someone. The thing about Lucas is that he's reliable, like a Toyota Camry or store brand cereal. He remembers birthdays, plans ahead for anniversaries, and actually listens when I talk. But he also color codes our grocery list and gets anxious if we don't stick to our meal plan. During our entire courtship, he never once just grabbed me and kissed me passionately. Everything was planned, calculated, safe. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, right on schedule according to his relationship timeline, it was with a modest ring he'd picked for its best quality to price ratio. He'd set up this elaborate scenario at a local park, complete with a spreadsheet showing why we were compatible. I'm not joking. There was a PowerPoint presentation involved. My friends thought it was adorable. I smiled and said yes because, well, what else was I supposed to do? I was pushing 30 and Lucas was stable, employed, and actually wanted to commit. During our engagement, the little things started piling up, like how he'd text me asking permission to buy new work shoes or practice conversations with my dad before having them. He once spent 3 hours researching the perfect temperature to serve wine at our engagement party. Who does that? The wedding was exactly what Lucas wanted: small, practical, budget conscious. I had always dreamed of something more spectacular, but Lucas had a whole presentation about wedding debt statistics and long term financial planning. He cried during our vows, which should have been sweet, but all I could think about was how Maurice would have probably winked at me instead, making me weak in the knees. My friends kept telling me how lucky I was. He's so thoughtful, they'd say. He really thinks everything through. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Another way is that he's about as spontaneous as a tax return. Even our honeymoon was planned down to the minute. Lucas had a literal itinerary printed out with buffer time built in for spontaneous activities. I'm not making this up. I kept telling myself marriage would change him, that somehow Lucas would develop that natural confidence I found so attractive in other men. Maybe one day he'd come home from work, pick me up, and carry me to the bedroom without first checking if it aligned with our weekly schedule. But you know what's really messed up? Lucas actually tries. He genuinely wants to make me happy. When I mentioned once that I missed going dancing, he spent 2 weeks taking online dance lessons before surprising me with a date night. It was sweet, but watching him count steps under his breath and apologize every time he made a mistake just made me want to scream. I look at our wedding photos sometimes, displayed in the geometrically perfect arrangement Lucas insisted on. There he is, crying as I walk down the aisle, while I'm smiling, that tight smile that says, "This is fine. This is what growing up looks like." My mom keeps saying I hit the jackpot with Lucas. He's so stable, she says. He'll make such a good father. She's probably right. He'd probably have spreadsheets for diaper changes and a 6-step flowchart for optimal burping technique. The worst part? Lucas knows. Not everything, but enough. He sees how I roll my eyes when he starts talking about efficiency metrics at his job. He notices when I get quiet after running into Maurice at the grocery store, looking all rugged and spontaneous with his messy hair and worn leather jacket. Lucas just tries harder, which makes it worse because how do you tell someone their best qualities are exactly what make them insufferable? How do you explain to your husband that you married him because you thought it was time to grow up, not because he made your heart race? So here I am, 3 years into marriage with a man who organizes the spice rack alphabetically and creates pivot tables for our monthly budget. A man who asks if I'm comfortable with the thermostat temperature and if I'd prefer the blue or gray pillowcases for optimal sleep hygiene. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what life would have been like if I'd waited for a real man, someone who doesn't need a pros and cons list to decide what to order for dinner. The breaking point was that stupid barbecue at Katie and Mike's place. Lucas volunteered to man the grill, his first mistake. He'd spent the entire morning watching YouTube videos about optimal grilling techniques and brought his own meat thermometer, but a fancy digital one that connected to his phone because heaven forbid a burger be 1 degree under temperature. There he was, hovering over the grill like it might explode, constantly checking his phone and muttering about heat distribution. Katie's husband, Mike, finally couldn't take it anymore. He just walked over, beer in hand, and took over like it was the most natural thing in the world. And you know what? Everyone relaxed. The whole backyard seemed to let out a collective sigh of relief. Lucas stepped back and started taking notes on his phone about Mike's technique. I wanted to sink into the ground. The other wives gave me looks, not mean ones, more like pity. That's worse, somehow. But that was just the start. Last month, Lucas came home excited about his new hobby, pottery. Not boxing, not rock climbing, not anything remotely masculine, pottery. He said his therapist suggested it for stress relief from work. Apparently, he'd been passed over for a promotion because he's too nice and needs to work on being more assertive. The guy who got the position, a total jerk, according to Lucas, but he gets things done. Now our garage has a pottery wheel, and Lucas spends his weekends making lopsided bowls and watching ceramics tutorials. He even bought a special apron with pockets for his tools. Meanwhile, Maurice, yeah, I still check his social media sometimes, posts pictures of the houses he's renovating, all sweaty and covered in sawdust. It's not fair. I've started spending more time with my girlfriends just to get away. They listen to me vent, but I can tell they don't really get it. At least he's not out at bars every night, they say. At least he helps around the house. Yeah, he helps. He has a chore chart with stickers for himself. A grown man with a sticker chart. The worst part is how he tries even harder when he senses I'm pulling away. He started leaving little notes around the house with terrible puns, buying me flowers, but only after researching which ones last longest and are optimal for our home's lighting conditions. He tears up during dog food commercials and wants to talk about his feelings constantly. Who raised him to be like this? I try to help him man up. When we watch movies and he gets emotional, I tell him real men don't cry at fictional characters. When he asks what I want for dinner for the millionth time, I snap and tell him to just make a decision for once. But he gets this hurt look and says he values my input on takeout. Last week, we ran into Maurice at the home improvement store. Lucas was there buying supplies for his precious pottery hobby, measuring tape in hand, comparing the dimensions of different shelving units for his craft corner. Maurice was buying actual construction supplies for actual man's work. The contrast was painful. Maurice gave me this knowing look, and I felt my stomach flip. He never needed a measuring tape. He just knew things, did things, made decisions. Meanwhile, Lucas was calculating the square footage of shelf space like he was solving a math problem. That night, I made the mistake of mentioning how nice it was to see Maurice. Lucas, being Lucas, asked if I wanted to invite him and his girlfriend over for dinner. Who does that? What kind of man invites his wife's ex over for dinner? I told him normal people don't do that. He responded by suggesting we look up social etiquette guidelines for interacting with exes. Not kidding. He wanted to research it. Sometimes I catch him practicing power poses in the bathroom mirror before work meetings. He read in some self help book that it boosts confidence. All it does is remind me that my husband needs WikiHow to teach him how to be a man. The other day, he came home excited because he successfully implemented an assertiveness technique during a meeting. Turns out he just managed to disagree with someone without apologizing 10 times afterward. And he wanted to um, celebrate with sparkling cider because he doesn't drink on weeknights. It affects sleep quality, apparently. Looking back, I should have seen the dinner party disaster coming. Lucas had spent a week planning it down to calculating the optimal number of appetizers per person. He even created a seating chart based on conversational compatibility. I'd been day drinking with the girls beforehand just to cope with the idea of another one of his overplanned social events. Everything was going fine, I guess, until our neighbor Brad started talking about new regulations at the manufacturing plant. Brad's one of those guys who actually speaks his mind, a normal person. He was saying the new safety protocols were overkill, just more red tape making everything slower. Lucas, being Lucas, couldn't help himself. He started in with his statistics and safety incident reports, speaking in that soft diplomatic voice he uses when he's trying to be assertive. Brad wasn't having it. He cut Lucas off, saying something like, "Sometimes you just got to get the job done, protocols or not." You know what my husband did? Instead of standing his ground, he backed down with this little nervous laugh and said, "Well, everyone's entitled to their perspective." Then he got up to refill the cheese plate like some kind of caterer at his own dinner party. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was years of watching him fold like a cheap lawn chair every time someone challenged him, but something in me snapped. "This is exactly why I married you," I heard myself saying. The room got quiet because all the real men weren't available. You could have heard a pin drop. Lucas froze, cheese plate in hand, with that stupid, surprised expression he gets when something doesn't go according to his plans. I should have stopped there, but once the dam broke, everything poured out. You want to know what real men do, Lucas? They don't spend an hour researching the perfect wine pairing for lasagna. They don't make spreadsheets for date night ideas. They definitely don't cry during their wedding vows or ask for directions or let people walk all over them at work. He just stood there, taking it, which made me angrier. You know what's worse than having a husband who color codes the spice rack? Having one who doesn't even defend himself when his wife is calling him out in front of everyone. Our guests stared at their plates, their wine glasses, anywhere but at us. Classic, Lucas started gathering empty glasses, like if he kept tidying up, this wouldn't be happening. You want to know something else? I was on a roll now. I've been talking to Maurice again. Nothing physical, but at least he knows how to take charge of a situation. At least he doesn't need a self help book to teach him how to be a man. Lucas finally stopped his nervous cleaning. He looked at me, then at our mortified guests, and said in that infuriatingly calm voice, "I think maybe we should continue this conversation in private." Private? I snapped. Now you want privacy? Where's this backbone when it actually matters? When Brad's walking all over you about safety protocols? When your boss passes you over for promotions because you're too nice? Someone, I think it was Katie, tried to suggest they should leave. Lucas, ever the perfect host, started apologizing to everyone, promising to reschedule. Reschedule? Like this was a meeting that ran over time. "I don't need your permission to tell the truth," I snapped. Everyone's thinking it. You're so busy trying to be perfect that you forgot how to be real. You know what Maurice said when I told him about your pottery hobby? He laughed, actually laughed, because real men build things. They don't play with clay. The room emptied pretty quickly after that. Lucas stood in our dining room, surrounded by half-empty wine glasses and his carefully arranged cheese plate, looking lost. For the first time, he didn't try to smooth things over or suggest we discuss our feelings. He just went upstairs and started packing a bag. "What are you doing?" I demanded, following him. Taking some time, he said quietly, folding his clothes with military precision. Even in this moment, everything had to be perfectly organized. So, you're running away. Real brave. He paused, actually looked me in the eye for once. No, Sam, I'm setting a boundary. Something I should have done a long time ago. I figured he'd be back in a few days. Lucas always came back, always tried to fix things. That's what he did. Solve problems with his charts and lists and careful planning. But days turned into weeks, and all I got was a text saying he was staying at his brother's place and would be in touch about dividing our assets. Dividing our assets, like we were some business venture being dissolved. Actually, that's exactly what our marriage had been to Lucas, wasn't it? Another project to manage. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer, just sent polite, formal texts about practical arrangements. When I swung by his brother's place, ready to have it out with him, he wasn't there. Turns out he joined a gym, not Planet Fitness, but some serious weightlifting place. Lucas, who used to say gyms were inefficient compared to his home workout routine, Katie finally took pity on me and filled me in. Apparently, Lucas had started therapy, not couples counseling, just for himself. He'd gotten a different position at work, something in project management where his attention to detail was actually valued. And he kept up with the pottery, but now he was selling pieces online successfully. He's doing better, Sam, Katie told me over coffee. Maybe you should try therapy too. I tried explaining my side to our friends, carefully editing out the worst parts of what I'd said, but they'd been there at the dinner party. They'd seen how I treated him over the years. Even my best friend Megan, who's always on my side, just shook her head. You know what your problem is? She said. You confused kindness with weakness. Lucas wasn't weak. He just didn't need to prove anything to anyone until you made him feel like he had to. Maurice reached out when he heard we'd separated, wanted to get drinks, catch up. I agreed, thinking maybe I'd been right all along. Maybe this was how things were supposed to go. But you know what? He spent the whole time bragging about his conquests, checking out the waitress, and complaining about his ex-wife. When he tried to kiss me in the parking lot, I realized how wrong I'd been about what makes a real man. The worst part? Lucas is thriving. His brother posted a video of him at some rock climbing gym, looking different, not just physically, though those gym sessions were paying off, but in how he carried himself. He wasn't checking his phone for proper climbing techniques or apologizing to the wall. He was just doing it. I stopped to social media. Okay, I still do. No more daily schedule posts or productivity tips. Instead, there are photos of his pottery, his new hiking hobby, casual group shots where he's actually looking at the camera instead of worrying about the optimal angle. He even posted about failing at a climbing route, but being proud of trying. The old Lucas would never have admitted failure publicly. When we finally met to discuss divorce proceedings, I almost didn't recognize him. He wasn't wearing one of his carefully coordinated outfits, just jeans and a t-shirt, but he seemed comfortable in his own skin. He'd grown a beard, not perfectly groomed like he would have insisted on before, just natural. I tried suggesting couples counseling, hearing myself sound like the overthinking, planning person I used to mock him for being, but Lucas just smiled. Actually smiled, not that nervous thing he used to do. I loved you, Sam, he said, but I didn't love who I became trying to be the man you wanted. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done pretending. That conversation messed me up more than I'd like to admit. Here I was, still living in our house with its color-coded closets and perfectly arranged spice rack, while Lucas was out there becoming someone new, someone real, just not the kind of real I'd pushed him to be. I found myself missing the stupid things, the little notes with terrible puns, the way he'd research restaurants for hours to find the perfect date night spot. Even the chore chart with its dumb sticker. At least he cared enough to try. Then I saw them together at the farmer's market. I'd gone to get some overpriced organic tomatoes, and there they were, Lucas and this pixie-like woman with paint-stained fingers looking at pottery supplies. Claire, that's her name. She illustrates children's books, according to her Instagram. Yes, I looked her up. Don't judge me. She was teaching him about different glazes, and he was actually laughing. Not that nervous laugh he used to do with me, but real deep laughter. He looked relaxed, wearing a clay-stained t-shirt and those cargo shorts I used to hate. His beard was slightly messy, and he hadn't styled his hair with the precision he used to obsess over. The worst part, when he spotted me, he didn't get flustered or start apologizing for running into me. He just nodded, said a casual, "Hey, Sam," and turned back to Claire, his hand resting naturally on her lower back. No calculated movements, no overthinking, just being. Started hearing about them through our mutual friends, how Lucas and Claire do pottery together in his new studio, how they go climbing and don't care if they fail, how she loves his dad jokes and actually encourages his puns. She even helped him set up an Etsy shop for his ceramics. Turns out people love his precise, perfectly symmetrical bowls. The same attention to detail I used to mock him for is now his signature style. Katie told me they took a spontaneous weekend trip to the coast. Lucas, Mr. Plan Everything, just packed a bag and went. No itinerary, no research about optimal routes or tourist ratings. When I asked if he'd had an anxiety attack about it, Katie just looked at me weird and said, "He's not that person anymore, Sam." Maybe he never was. Maybe that was just who he thought he had to be for you. The thing that really got me? I overheard him at the coffee shop where I like to work sometimes. He was having a business meeting about expanding his pottery business. This guy was trying to steamroll him about production quotas and mass manufacturing, and Lucas just calmly said, "That's not the direction I want to take my art." He called it art, not a calculated business venture. When the guy pushed back, Lucas didn't cave or get flustered. He just stood firm, thanked him for his time, and left. I watched him walk out, remembering how I used to wish he'd stand up for himself. Turns out he could, just not in the aggressive way I thought he needed to. He found his own way of being strong, and I was too busy trying to change him to see it coming. Claire came in right after his meeting. I pretended to be absorbed in my laptop while watching them. She took one look at his face and knew something was up. Instead of trying to fix it or offering solutions like I would have, she just squeezed his hand and asked if he wanted to throw some pots. He lit up like I'd never seen during our marriage. That's when it hit me. Claire wasn't trying to make him into anything. She wasn't waiting for him to man up or comparing him to some ideal. She just let him be Lucas. And somehow that allowed him to become more himself than he ever was with me. I didn't expect to see them at Katie's wedding. I knew they'd be there. Katie and Lucas stayed close friends, another thing that surprised me. But I wasn't prepared for how it would feel. Lucas was a groomsman, looking sharp in his suit but relaxed. Nothing like the stiff, overthinking guy who used to triple check his tie in our wedding photos. Claire was wearing this flowy, vintage dress, her hair all messy, pretty with dried flowers woven through it. The old Lucas would have stressed about how unconventional it was for a wedding. Hmm. This. Lucas looked at her like she was the only person in the room. During the ceremony, I watched him squeeze her hand when the couple said their vows. No tears, no nervous fidgeting, just this quiet confidence I'd never seen before. He gave a toast at the reception, and I waited for the index cards to come out, for the carefully rehearsed speech with statistical references about lasting marriages. Instead, he stood up, no notes, and spoke from the heart about love and growth and being true to yourself. People actually laughed at his jokes, not polite chuckles, but real laughter. Claire watched him with this proud little smile, not even a hint of embarrassment or wish for him to be different. I ended up dancing with this guy, Chad, one of the other groomsmen. Tall, muscular, super confident, exactly the type I used to wish Lucas would be. He spent the whole time talking about his CrossFit routine and how most women can't handle a real alpha male. I caught Lucas's eye across the dance floor while Chad was mid brag, and for a split second, we shared this look of understanding that made me laugh and want to cry at the same time. Later, I overheard Claire and Lucas by the dessert table. She was teasing him about how he'd organized the cupcakes by color gradient without even realizing it. Instead of getting defensive or apologizing like he would have with me, he just pulled her close and said, "You love my organized chaos." And she did. She genuinely did. That's when it really sank in. I'd spent our entire marriage trying to turn Lucas into someone else's version of a real man when he was actually becoming one by simply being himself. All that attention to detail I mocked, he turned it into art. The sensitivity I thought made him weak, it made him emotionally intelligent enough to work through his issues and grow. The carefulness I mistook for cowardice, it was actually thoughtfulness. I watched them leave the reception early, not because Lucas was overwhelmed by the social interaction like he used to be, but because they were teaching a couple's pottery class the next morning. They looked so natural together, so comfortable, no one trying to change anyone else, no one settling or wishing for something different. You know what the worst part is? Lucas didn't get a better woman. He became a better person while I stayed exactly the same. Still judging, still wanting things to be different, still not understanding that being a real man has nothing to do with dominance or aggression or never showing emotion. All those things I used to hate about him, they were never the problem. I was. And now I get to watch him be happy with someone who appreciates all the things I was too shallow to value, while I'm here dancing with guys like Chad and finally understanding what I threw away. I used to tell everyone I married Lucas because real men weren't available. Turns out I had a real man all along. I was just too busy looking for a stereotype to notice.